cheating with notes. Do I need a microphone? Do I need a microphone? No, I'm not going to microphone. Okay. So this is a true story. This actually happened to me in my life. But I don't know if this story tells the truth. That's something I'm still working on. So, do you all know the story of Oedipus? How when he was a baby, Oracle at Delphi told his parents, the king and queen of Thebes, that he would grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. And since that didn't really appeal to either one of them, they ordered that he be taken to the countryside and abandoned to the elements. And of course he was rescued, raised in a neighboring kingdom, and then one day as a brash young man had a chance encounter with his biological father, killed him in some kind of fit of ancient Greek road rage, entered Thebes as a stranger, and married the queen, his mother. Oops. This is my Oedipus story. I have never been what you would call a graceful person. By the time I was 20 years old, I had sprained each of my ankles twice, requiring crutches once on each side. The first time I sprained my ankle, I jumped off a step, one, singular, the day before I started 8th grade. I slipped on some ice in the driveway and spent the entire month of February, my sophomore year of college, navigating campus with the crutches and this complicated, like, air cast ace bandage sock combination. So you could say that balance was not my strong suit. Because of my history of ankle-based misadventures, I had always been very wary of high heels. Never very high, never very narrow, all things in moderation. Every now and then, a girl just wants to dress up. So in 2004, when some friends of mine were getting married, I had been sprain-free for almost 8 years. I decided it was time for me to have some fun. So I bought this fabulous, bright orange dress, which sounds awful, but it was gorgeous. And it simply demanded really sassy shoes. I found this pair that looked perfect, but the heels were about 3.5 inches high, as opposed to my usual like 1.5. So I tried them on, and I took some tentative steps through the aisles of the DSW. Wobbly? Yes. Dangers? No. Sassy? Oh, yes, definitely. Sold. On the day of the wedding, before I walked out the door, I gave myself a long, hard look in the mirror and made a pronouncement. The Oracle at Belmont, if you will. Marsha, look out. Pride goeth before a fall, and you are awfully proud of those shoes, and you are awfully prone to fall. You're going to sprain your ankle if you're not careful. These shoes will make you sprain your ankle. So I got to the wedding without incident, and I was currently doing a show at the time, which was a terrible show full of stories for another time. So I had to run right out after the ceremony, and then when the show was over, literally, I ran, which was a terrible idea, out to the street to catch a cab, ran up the steps into the reception hall, ran over to the bar to get a drink, ran to the dance floor to join my friends. All of this time, I'm painfully conscious of my shoes, of the clock ticking, of pressing my luck, of tempting fate. The longer I keep them on, the more likely I am to crash and burn, or in my case, to crash and sprain. Finally, it's midnight. I have made it through. The band is packing up. People are gathering their purses, stealing centerpieces, saying goodbye. I am standing in a little circle with my friends, regaling with them with a story about the creepy guy in the past of the show I was doing who looked like Mark Twain, who used to hit on me in the dressing room. When the Oracle in my head speaks again, Marsha, this has gone on long enough. You've had your fun. Now take off the damn shoes. Better safe than sorry. So who am I to argue with logic like that? I take off my shoes, put them just in front of me, inside the circle where my friends are standing. So people who know me know that I can get a little enthusiastic if I'm telling a story, especially if I'm telling a story with a glass of wine in my hand. I talk aloud, I talk with my hands, sometimes I even jump up and down. And this night was no exception, so I jump up and down onto my shoes. My left foot makes a nice 90-degree angle with the rest of my leg, and the next thing I know, I'm sitting on the floor, grasping my already swollen ankle, looking up at a circle of my friends who are looking down in dumbfounded, horrified concern. Oops. crutches and 6 weeks of physical therapy later, I start to think about what all this means. Everyone makes a big deal out of Oedipus gouging out his own eyes in horror at what he'd done, but for me, the tragedy of his story comes from the fact that this prophecy was only fulfilled because his parents tried to avoid it. I sprained my ankle because I was determined not to sprain my ankle. So is it possible to avoid your fate? When you try to deter or avoid a prophecy, whether it comes from the oracle at Delphi or your own face in the mirror, do you inadvertently make it happen? Like telling someone don't think about giraffes, but on a much more significant scale. So this story is true, but I can't accept that that is the truth. One thing I learned in physical therapy is that balance comes from 3 places. From visual cues, what you're looking at, from those little stones that roll around in your inner ear, and from muscle strength, core muscle strength to be specific. So imagine me, if you will, the girl with the unreliable ankles, standing on one leg, on one of those like half ball things, like flat and then a ball, on one leg, catching a ball, turning 90 degrees, and then throwing it again in physical therapy. I did that. That is true too. You could argue that if Oedipus' parents had just ignored the prophecy, sure, he might have deliberately killed his father, but he would never have been so crazy as to knowingly marry his mother. You could also argue that if I had just kept my shoes on, I would have been fine. But of course, we'll never know. What I do know is this. These days, when I get that feeling of impending doom, like that, like I'm walking some kind of tightrope between safety and disaster, and all I can think about is my own gracelessness and the likelihood that I'll fall, I take a breath, look ahead, rattle those stones in my inner ear, engage my core, and keep walking. By the way, in Greek, the name Oedipus means swollen feet. So named because when he was abandoned, his ankles were pierced and his feet were pinned together to ensure that he would never, ever survive. Thank you.